welcome to Artificiality and our new podcasting studio. This is a nice trial, so hopefully this is going to work out for us, shifting just from audio only to video as well. And new format for us is a conversation between the two of us. Helen will bring something to the table from science. I'll bring something to the table from products, and we'll try and put that in the frame of the human experience. Now, stay with us because we have some important announcements about things that are going on for us and Artificiality this year that you'll want to listen into and just sort of be prepared for what we're up to this year. All right, let's start off. What do you have for us?
Okay, well, I have two things,
All right.
and they're both in the category of agents because it's such a hot topic. Two papers published on Archive in December, both really quite interesting. One is by Chirag Shah and Ryan White, one from Chirag's from University of Washington and Ryan from Microsoft Research, called Agents Are Not Enough. And what this paper is about is literally discussing that. Why is there this big gap between we hear agents are going to take over the world and be in all the workplaces by at the end of this year, and I think Mark Benioff says they're going to deploy 1 billion this year or something like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we also hear that the agents can't do much. They're sort of fundamentally limited. So how do you sort of square this circle? And the other paper that reinforces that is one out of Carnegie Mellon, I believe it is, and Duke and a couple of independent researchers called The Agent Company Benchmarking Large Language Model Agents on Consequential Real-World Tasks. So what these two papers do is sort of give us an expose, if you like, about what this conundrum is. Are we going to have the world overrun with agents, or are we not? And they present two sort of parallel but slightly different arguments to sort of explain that story. In the benchmarking one, the agent company is like a new sort of benchmarking test. Their thesis being that the benchmarks for agents aren't great. So we kind of get stuck in this world of thinking that they're fantastic versus they're not fantastic. You know what I mean? Yeah. So then this one's interesting because what it really shows is that that agents do quite well until they have more complex tasks. So the complex tasks could be many, many things over time, or things that don't really relate to what they've been trained on. So they're less good at social things, or less good where there's training data that's generally, or there's data that's private and they haven't been able to be trained on it. So financial work inside of companies, because that's not as obvious and not as sort of available in the training data. So it's quite interesting because even though all these agents are really improving on human tasks, what these papers highlight is that even the best models will still fail at those really simple things that humans find intuitive, like social interactions, and that the sort of best level of success was actually in Claude 3.5, and it got to like 24% on these sort of long-range tasks. So we've really got to have this sort of more systems view. So the other paper, Agents Aren't Enough, really complements this by saying, well, what do you need to, what's one of the solutions for this? And it's thinking more about needing to put in almost a sort of another interface between the agent and the user. And that interface, if you like, is are SIMs. The SIMs represent the preferences and priorities of the users, and the SIMs interact with another level, which is the personal assistant. And so this whole thing is more moving to these sort of ecosystem view. So it's interesting. We've got benchmarks, the different kind of benchmark that sort of tries to capture more human social complexity. And then we've got a discussion about how that human social complexity might need to be wrapped up in another layer of simulation. So it's pretty cool.
So why do these agents fail? That stuff that we find so easy?
mostly because they've been trained on really structured tasks or on coding. So they've learned a lot of coding. So they perform really well on things like SweBench, which is a coding task, and that's kind of a real world coding task. But then they fail pretty spectacularly on complex data science and finance work. And they're pretty good on project management. They're really actually quite good on HR, which is, I guess, something that's sort of either in the training data, which we know there's a lot of that, but it's also sort of mechanistic and maybe a few steps. But it's more this complexity that they can't handle. And there's really funky things that happen too. Like some of these, there's lack of common sense. They didn't go on and talk to someone that they were recommended to go talk to. A human would just go do that, right? You get introduced to someone, you go and do it. More complex UX is really confounding. So they got really confused by pop-ups.
And don't we all?
Yeah. Humans still do better on pop-ups. We know to click the X. But the agents really struggled with that. And they struggled with things like, having to navigate multiple image uploads and things like that, which I assume in the paper was probably like expense forms and things like that being loaded up.
I can't decide whether the website designs are going to shift towards simpler things without the pop-ups, or if everybody's going to try and look like Forbes and throw a lot of pop-ups up there to confound the agents.
Or as one of our subscribers suggested, we're just going to go back to really simple text websites for agents to be able to navigate.
So what do we know about what it's going to take to trust these things, right? So some things they do well at, some things they don't do well at. The line there is not necessarily intuitive, right? Not being able to do well at complex finance, but being able to do well at HR, which is also has a level of complexity. So how do we sift through that?
Well, that's where that Sims paper is pretty interesting, because the Sims paper is basically that trust will. I mean, it reinforces that trust takes time to build up. Yeah. And it proposes that the actual Sims architecture, where you're almost abstracting your own preferences and being able to manage those quite separately, will be an important part of trust. It also hints at how trust is. It's also like human trust in that, responsiveness and reliability. Reliability really matters. So we might think of agents being sort of cost benefit, like is it worth going through the trouble of setting it up? But it's actually going to be an erosion of trust if these things constantly fail or ping you and ask you for things. So the design of these is from an experience perspective, we're still yet to really understand what the trade-off is between, say, an agent that constantly needs to ask you your password versus an agent that knows your password, can change your password without even asking you, and then goes off and does something that you weren't expecting it to do. So the scope of autonomy is going to be really, really intertwined with trust. And I go back to thinking about Hidalgo's work out of MIT when he was studying how humans judge machines. Yeah. And he had that very simple, obviously there's nuance here, but that very simple sort of separation. Humans judge humans based on intent. Humans judge machines based on consequences and outcome. And so we're going to be pretty harsh on these agents and get pretty impatient with them. And I sense that the adoption of these agents is the more autonomous agents will it'll be a little bit like when voice technologies first came out, right? Yeah. So they weren't really great. So you get a few people who are really into them and use, Siri for everything and got used to configuring Siri to do lots of things. The vast majority of people just set a timer and that's it. And what you lose if you get people to abandon too early because it's not good enough is you lose that opportunity to get people back to show you how much things have improved. So I think designers have to be really cautious about overhyping what AI agents can do, because adoption would stall and you won't get people back again to see how they've got better is one way of looking at it.
Cool. All right, trust. We're going to bridge the big app, bridge over to the product. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so product. What I'm interested in is these new AI wearables that got announced at CES. Now, for context, we have not tried these. We did not go to CES this year, so we have not actually tried them ourselves. But they are important to sort of watch and monitor to see what happens. Right? We have this long history of wearables from Google Glass to now the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, the Humane pens, all of these variety of things. There's something that's sort of interesting about this new wave. So we've got new earbuds from something called Human Pods, wristbands that sort of sit on your wrist from the thing called Bee, and it's a product called the Bee Pioneer. And then this little pod from a company called Omi that you can like wear as a pendant, but you can also stick it to your head using medical tape. And now as I do that, I start to think about, well, is it going to be here? Is it going to be like, do I have hair under it or anything? But anyway, these things are, they're all come together and they're different, but there's some common things that are important. One thing that's really important and why this matters is that they're always on. So we're moving from, at least these products seem to be shifting from this world of where you have wake words. I'm going to turn this thing on. I'm going to use a wake word. If I do it now, every device here is going to show up if I say SIRI. But all these wake words to now these things are always on. And so it's passive. It's constantly listening to you. So second point reason why this really matters is it's like this question of privacy. And basically it sure feels like they're going, privacy, whatever. They're always on. And you actually, for one of them, it's the Omi, you actually have to opt out of it showing a light, meaning that when it's recording, there's nothing on. It doesn't have like a green light. Like if you have home cameras, like the Google cameras have a little light that shows that it's recording. This only turns on a light when you're not recording, which is really bizarre and counterintuitive.
That's kind of like, I know, I'd rather see a light showing that your brain is on.
Yeah.
Tick, 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 tick.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that's really matters is these things are priced really cheaply. They're all under $100. They're like $50 to $80-ish, somewhere in that time. So it's sort of this razor blade model, right? So they've got the cheap hardware. It's all about the software subscription that captures everything. So beyond that, what I think is really interesting is there's this, first of all, is Omi claims that you can just think something, and through the EEG, sensor in the pod, it will be able to understand that you're communicating with it.
Stop.
Exactly.
So you go, I'm thinking about you, Omi, and it turns the light on.
No, because it turns the light off.
Turns the light off.
So to be recording.
Got it.
Yes.
So you're right. It's counterintuitive because I completely went the wrong way.
Went the wrong way.
And then it starts to listen to what you say or to what everybody says, or is it tracking all your brain waves?
We don't know yet.
Is this just a made up thing?
It's not really. It's not described very well anywhere. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anybody who's actually seems to have validly tested this, but that's the idea, is that it's mind reading without having any implant like a Neuralink. So that's interesting. Second thing that I found interesting is there's this wave of it's all about apps. So a couple of these devices, they're making noise because they're coming out and they've got a huge number of apps that have already been developed. So it's kind of like they're trying to it feels to me like the App Store is back again and everybody wants to be Apple or Google and have an App Store and clip the ticket on these apps. I'm not quite sure how that really works very well, in that these devices don't have screens. There's no display. You have to be looking at your phone, and I will have to see. I mean, I'd be curious to test these things. Send them to us. I'd be curious to see what it feels like to know that you have an app running. What is it? How does it signify to you that an app is running unless you pull your phone out and look at it? And how are they going to manage all of what the apps do? Security and privacy for all of those. Like, running an app store is not easy. That's one of the reasons why Apple took a long time to start an app store, is it's really not easy. But even after this, it's really not easy. Third thing I think is interesting is this is they're all designed to sort of be memory prosthetics, right? So they're there to record, transcribe, summarize everything. They generate to-do lists. They remind you of things. They prompt you of things. They try and anticipate things. So that then makes me wonder sort of what's the question about having this second self almost, right? Like if they're going to sit there and do all of this for you, how does this reshape how we interact with experiences, how we recall them? What happens to our memory when we're doing all of this? We've witnessed all of this when people sitting on Zoom and they say they're paying attention and they're multitasking. They're not paying attention at all. So, and you get people who now send their AI, assistants to the meeting rather than going to it themselves. So are we just going to be sitting there and not paying attention really because we know the device is recording, and even if we won't go back to it again, what's going to happen to our memory? I find that in the opposite is also really interesting. Is what does it mean? Like, can we still forget things, right? Like if we're recording everything that's happening in our lives, one of the convenient things is we can kind of, well, I can say something to you and you could say you didn't like what I said to you. And then we can sort of try to forget that moment happened, right? But if it's all recorded and if it's all cataloged and be able, and the machine will remember it for you and bring it back to you, how can we actually forget things that we actually like to forget?
Well, that sounds like one of our best disagreements. I'm constantly bringing it up like a week later.
I know. That's
now
the
you're
problem.
saying you want to forget that.
I think it would be nice to forget some of those things.
Well, it's called moving on.
Yes,
okay,
moving
so
on.
let's break this down because
Yes.
you just put a lot of different things there. First, let's just deal with the big elephant in the room,
Okay.
which is, for as long as humans have existed, we have understood that our behavior changes when we think we're being watched, right? So that's the core tenet of surveillance, is this idea that, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what have you got to worry about? Well, we can debunk that because it doesn't matter whether you're doing anything right or wrong. The whole point is a meta level above that, which is our behavior changes if we think we're being watched. So at the scale of our entire society, what does it mean when someone walks in wearing a pair of glasses that look like meta glasses, or a weird thing on their head? Honestly, it's bizarre. It says something.
It says something.
It really does say something. But and the band is weird because the band doesn't give you an affordance of a surveillance technique, does it?
It could be up my sleeve, just like this bracelet's up my sleeve. You don't even know it's there.
But it could be one of those life bands that people wear and what have you.
It looks like a step counter, kind of a band. Literally like one of those exercise bands. It doesn't have a big screen. It's got a little bit there. Yeah, looks like all kinds of.
Oh, and you can imagine a product like Aura, the Ring, being able to do this. Sure. These things are being so miniaturized. So we've got the surveillance effect, and we're just going to be constantly surveilled all the time. Yeah. And I a few years ago I would have thought that would never be normalized because the Google Glass was so completely pushed out. But when you look at how normalized it is to record every single meeting you're ever in. Very few corporate meetings we have now are not recorded. And I don't know whether people just assume that no one's ever going to look at them again or whatever, or just, I don't know, there's no, like, life is cheap, that these interactions are cheap, and they don't matter. But that normalization of constant surveillance seems to be shifting, that we seem to be going in that direction. And I don't really know what that means.
Well, of course, I mean, you can say it I think we are shifting towards some level of normalization, but it doesn't mean that I accept it. I'm not interested. Too many times people show up in a Zoom meeting and it's just automatically popping up their AI assistant, and I just don't let them in. I'm just not interested.
But more and more people don't even notice, right?
No, they don't notice.
So there's that, and I think that's something that fits into the sort of broader culture of AI that we're moving into, where there's this mediation constantly through surveillance and sort of an information layer. It's less about the experience than capturing the experience. Sure. And so it in some ways always feels like we're living in the past. I've got to go back and look at something. I don't need to remember it now. I don't need to think about it now. I'll come back to it. I just need to know where to find it.
Yeah, I think there's an important part here too, which is we're all trying to get adjusted to what level of trust we have in companies that are capturing our lives. Surveillance, watching the chats we have with conversational AI agents, this level of intimacy that is going through into the digital realm and into our intimacy economy. Our question is, do we trust those companies? That's a decision that each individual gets to make on their own. But when you're recording me, I have to therefore understand and figure out whether I trust your decisions about where that information's going, where it's being stored, who's capturing it, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we're now sort of outsourcing that trust or having to assume someone else's level of trust. I mean, it gets really messy really
Well, I think it's
quickly.
it just becomes instantly abstracted. You can't make that decision. You have no choice. It's a little bit like, okay, check the box. If I want to talk to you, I've got to check the box.
Yeah.
You know, there is no realistic choice.
Yeah.
Unless there are moments, of course, when you can not let someone's AI agent into your meeting, but in a physical in-person environment, I haven't seen anyone yet say, can you please turn those glasses off? I mean, I'm sure someone said it somewhere, but all of the interactions I've had, you just don't even know. And it's now weird to ask someone to turn their glasses off.
Well, I think that at our summit in October, we will be asking everyone to turn their recording devices off. You know, I think that might actually be a nice standard.
Well, it would at least get in front of the problem of what happens if your device records something different than my device.
All right. Anything else?
Well, there's a human experience here that we just touched on before, which is, you know, everything's mediated through information, which sort of, in a weird way, pushes experience to the past. Your experience, it's just about capturing experience. So will people stop listening?
I wonder.
I mean, we're pretty bad at listening anyway.
We're pretty bad at listening. I would imagine so. I mean, think about how much attention has collapsed, right? It's been completely fracked into little bits, as D. Graham Burnett says. By the way, stay tuned. We will have a great podcast with him coming up soon. And if that's all come across, we can't pay attention. This always on recording allows us to not pay attention. It doesn't push us to actually say, wait, I have to focus for longer. You and I have gone through this for more than a decade where we try to, you know, increase our level of focus, right? Recapture that ability to pay attention. But if it's always recorded and you're not really very motivated, it just allows you to just drift off and not think because you say, oh, well, I can come back and watch it later, right? Too many times people are in meetings where they're like, is this being recorded so I can look at it later? And I sit there thinking, there's no way you're actually going to go back and look at it. You're just giving yourself permission to not listen.
Yeah, I kind of wonder the same thing.
I think that's terrible.
It's not a great outcome for our ability to collectively solve problems.
Yeah. Okay, so last bit for today is just to give a little bit of updates and some heads up of things that are going to be going on this year. So first of all, we are shifting some of our production schedule and pattern. We'll be shifting to more pods, more videos, more audios, etc. We will be putting out our written work on a monthly basis, so get ready for sort of a monthly publication. Subscribe at artificiality.world. All that said, be prepared for a domain shift, which will be coming up, but don't worry, we'll forward it all. We are going to be shifting to artificialityinstitute.com, mostly because, A, it's a branding change, if you will. I mean, it sort of helps people focus on what we actually do, but also top-level domains, TLDs. There's a high bias towards .com in every corporate email system, so that's where we're going. Beyond all that, we have a very exciting summit that will be October 23rd to 25th in Bend, Oregon. We have some great speakers already lined up. So returning from last year, Jonathan Colton, a musician, Adam Cutler, distinguished designer from IBM, Jamer Hunt, a professor from the Parsons School of Design and author of Not to Scale, Josh Lovejoy, principal designer from Amazon. You can find podcasts with most of those in our history. In addition to that, we have some exciting new speakers that we haven't had before. Jonathan Feinstein, who's a professor at the Yale School of Management, who we had a podcast with recently about his book, Creativity in Large-Scale Contexts, Using Complexity Science to Understand Creativity. John Havens, who's at the IEEE, who's also author of Artificial Intelligence. We had a wonderful podcast with him recently. Maggie Jackson, who we'll be interviewing shortly, author of Uncertain and Distracted and other books. Sir Jeff Mulgan, who is a professor collective intelligence at UCL, University College London, and author of When Science Meets Power. Ellie Pavlik, professor of computer science at Brown University, and also a researcher at Google DeepMind. And Beth Rudden, who's the CEO of Bast AI and author of AI for the Rest of Us. And I forgot, John Pasmore is also returning, CEO of Latimer. We're very excited about that. That was just recently confirmed, so that's why it was last on my list. So we're very excited for that. If you're interested in that, go to our website, click on Summit, submit a form, tell us that you're interested, shoot us an email, send us a message on LinkedIn, something like that. So two other things. One is for those of you in corporates, we're bringing our corporate research out more to the world. We've been sort of piloting that for the last year and a half. And so reach out to us if you're interested in bringing our research to your corporate, small groups, large groups. It's over the annual period, 10 different presentations. There's a nice tab on our website to look at that. And finally, we are working on a new project called The Chronicle, and where we're looking to bear witness to this large-scale transition of increasing AI in our world. There's also something on our website there. And if you're interested in sharing that, if you're interested in participating in this research project, especially if you're a product leader or designer, and you're interested in actually being involved in hearing these stories and helping us figure out how to take the stories of what people want, what they don't want, and advocate for a better future with AI, reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So there you go. That's it. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care of each other. It's better than solid state.